Subscribe to our YouTube channel and press the bell icon to get the latest updates.
The Print Off the Cuff, presented by IIFL Wealth and Asset Management, corporate partner AU Small Finance Bank, in association with global insurance brokers, airline partner SpiceJet.
Welcome to this episode of Off the Cuff. As you can see, we're in this beautiful, serene location in Shillong at Wards Lake, where every year the Cherry Blossom Literary Festival is celebrated. We have with us the Editor-in-Chief of The Print, Mr. Shekhar Gupta. And joining us today is the Meghalaya Chief Minister, Conrad Sangma. Welcome to The Print, sir.
Thank you. Thank you so much.
Conrad, welcome to Off the Cuff and welcome and thank you very much for making this possible. Because as you know, I look for an excuse to come to Shillong.
That's so nice. Thank you so much. It's great to have you over. And this particular festival that we're having, this literary festival, it's something that we want to do every year. So we feel that it's a great place and great environment to have this. So thank you for coming over for this festival.
Because you know what, when I lived here a long time back, almost 4 decades back, my Meghalaya friends had a complaint with me that you spent nearly 3 years here but wrote no story on Meghalaya because there was no trouble in Meghalaya and all the rest of the Northeast had trouble, right? Naga, Mizo insurgencies were on, Tripura had trouble, Manipuri insurgency was on,
right.
Assam was blockaded. But still, why do you think Meghalaya has not got the peace dividend as it should have got by now?
I wouldn't say it has not got it because Shillong is one of the cities in Northeast has always been seen as the capital of the Northeast, and that feel is still there. And so, if you speak to anybody from the Northeast, rest of Northeast, you will always see that they have a special kind of a link and inclination towards Shillong. And not only that, Shillong itself has grown a lot in the past many years. Of course, much more is there to be desired, and things need to be pushed. But yes, there have been challenges, but I think overall Shillong has moved a long way, and that acceptability of Shillong as one of the major destinations for tourism, as well as one of the major destinations for education, is still there.
You've lately seen some trouble, which was not there for a long time in Shillong.
There are always once in a while.
In fact, not since 1980.
No, it's not like that. In fact, through the years, in the last 2 decades, Shillong and the rest of Meghalaya has seen some trouble of insurgency. There have been 2 or 3 groups, major groups, that have caused a bit of unrest in the state. But that has changed a lot, and most of them are not there anymore, existing anymore. And in fact, in the last 3 years, there have not been any incidents of any kind of a major terrorist or underground or militant activity or attack or loss of lives. But yes, there have been individual incidents that happened. Last time also we saw some small incident happened, and that was again because of the action that was taken at that point in time to restore some peace. There were some incidents of extortion taking place, and because of one incident that took place, there was a reaction from the public. But that, after about 2 to 3 weeks, that subsided also.
That is the August 15.
That's right.
Yeah.
That's right.
And what was at the root of it, you think? Because see, what happens is those things make national headlines.
Absolutely. It's good that you are in fact asking this. So what happened, I need to give a bit of background on this. So during the last 2 months, there was a kind of movement where there was some extortions being given to individuals. When the government started cracking down on that, we got to understand that there were some individuals from surrendered groups who were involved. And during one of the operations to catch them, unluckily, one person lost his life. There was a reaction from the public on that aspect. And we feel that it was not necessarily a reaction just because of that incident, but I think a general sense of frustration, keeping in mind the last 2 years has been quite a difficult time for everybody. So we feel that it was a culmination or kind of a reaction to all of these aspects in the last 2 years. But as I said that in the 2 weeks, followed after that, we were able to neutralize the overall situation, cool down the situation, and things are back to normal now in Shillong.
I want to talk about the politics in the state and your first response on the major political development. 12 of the 17 Congress MLAs have, gone over to the Trinamool Congress fold. The party is trying to make inroads into the state. So how would you view this?
Yes, we are seeing that there is a very strong move by other political parties now coming into the Northeast and trying to kind of grab some of the political space that's there. But this is kind of, for at least for the ruling government and for the NPP, which is my political party, it's something that is, something that, if you look at it, analyze it politically, it will help the party. And therefore, we are seeing that there is a complete division within the opposition. You're seeing that the Congress, which was a major force, of course, in the Northeast, today is not there in Arunachal Pradesh. In Manipur, it's disappearing. There's no sign of them in Tripura. Mizoram, they're weakening. Assam, they had a very major loss. And now in Meghalaya also, there's a major defection that has taken place. So therefore, it's a big loss for the Congress. And I think the Congress will have difficult times in the Northeast, especially in Meghalaya.
So you would see the TMC as a viable threat for the 23 polls?
I think as a political party and as a politician, every single move has to be taken seriously. And I don't underestimate anybody. And therefore, whatever happens now in the political arena, I have to be watching it. And as a political party, we need to make sure that we play our game accordingly. And we will do that. And of course, it's a decision that has been taken by the opposition leader who was in the Congress. And I wish him the best in the Trinamool. And obviously, we will continue to work and organize our political base in the way forward as we feel appropriate.
Does it really matter to you what the state of play is? Because you got the first umpire, the second umpire, the third umpire, all with you, as long as you are partners with BJP. So whoever wins, it will be BJP partner. So between Amit Shah and Hemanta, something will be done.
It's not always that simple. Of course, at the end of the day, center plays an important role. There is no doubt. But then the local politics also has to be seen. If the numbers don't come, if we don't get enough MLAs, if you're not able to fulfill the desires of the people and develop and work on the governance, no matter how much, no matter, Empire 1, 2, 3, as you mentioned, it doesn't help if you don't have good players and you cannot bat and you cannot ball. So you have to get your house in order, you have to work. When it comes to BJP, of course, we are working with BJP at Meghalaya and Manipur and other states. But we have been very clear also that we continue to maintain our identity as a party, and we are a party that's focused mostly on the Northeast.
I want to pick up on that actually, because in the recent by-polls, that were held in the state, your party in fact went head-to-head for one of the seats in Rajabala. So where does your relationship currently stand with the BJP and the NEDA in the region?
No, we are very clear that when it comes to the coalition, that we are in the coalition with them, whether it's in Manipur or in Arunachal or here in Meghalaya. But that does not mean that we will compromise on our own identity and the stand of the party. So we are very clear that we will continue to work for the party and make it grow. That does not mean that we'll compromise with them or that does not mean we'll not work with them. Based on the situation, yes, for the sake of the coalition and stability in the government, we will work with whichever party we feel comfortable with. But when it comes to elections, we will work to strengthen our own base and our own party.
Conrad, of all the tribal states in the Northeast, Meghalaya was the most cosmopolitan.
Right.
Shillong has been the most cosmopolitan city, even more than Guwahati always. So why is it that lately we've begun to see these demands for inner line permit, a kind of distancing Shillong from the rest instead of coming closer to the rest?
I don't feel that a demand for an ILP is something that's distancing. We need to realize that number one, tourism, of course, is a very important aspect, and there is huge economic gains for us to tourism. and through other activities related to tourism. But there is no harm in looking at one's own state and the public out here and saying that we are concerned about our own identity and concerned about our own people. So therefore, my first point being that therefore there is no harm. Both can go along. If you look at other states or other countries, you need to apply for visas, you need to go for there, but still people go. So people maintain their identity and mechanisms in which they can protect their people. So that's number one. So I don't feel that it's necessary that the two cannot go hand in hand. Number two is that the situations were very complicated when we had the Citizen Amendment Act that came in. And politically speaking, that created a lot of insecurity and a lot of further tension within the Northeast. And that is why you saw the central government come out with ILPs in Manipur and other parts of the Northeast. They exempted Meghalaya wherever the six scheduled areas were there. So keeping in mind the political dynamics and the changes that took place, certain steps had to be taken to build up the confidence of the people. And that's what, this was one of the steps that had to be done. And as I said, it's not necessary that both cannot go hand in hand. Economic development, tourism, and measures to have some sense of security and protection for our people can easily go hand in hand.
So you support the idea of an ILP, inner line permit for Meghalaya?
So we have passed a resolution in the state assembly for the ILP quite a long time back. Our point is very simple, that we, of course, we want economic development, but the sense of security for our people is important. If there is another mechanism that Government of India can give more, a sense of security to our people. We had passed a law in our own state called the Meghalaya Resident Safety Act, and we had asked the Government of India to clear that. If those kind of parallel laws
they haven't ratified it yet.
They haven't ratified it yet. So if those kind of laws had come in, then maybe we would not have had to go for a demand for an ILP. So the point being, let's not focus on ILP as such. The idea is to have a mechanism, and let that mechanism be MRSSA, or let it be ILP, or some other mechanism. We are open to those discussions.
MRSSA is this Meghalaya Resident
Safety Act.
Safety Act. How does that work?
So that requires that people who are planning to come and stay, are planning to come and visit the state, just required to fill up a normal registration, which will be something that is online, and a system that is going to be, a registration which you do in a hotel. So now, for example, if you're coming in, you anyway have to give your identity card, you have to give all your details in the hotel when you check in. All we're saying is, we just require you to do it in advance when you come in. And even if you don't do it in advance, within 48 hours when you enter, while you're in the hotel, you register, and this will be brought online, and there'll be a mechanism to monitor the entire aspect online. So it's a system that's already existing, in fact, but it will be centralized and it will be made online, and there will be a provision to register in advance. So it's really not infringing into anybody's personal rights or stopping anybody. It's just a matter of collecting information of the people who will be coming in, and that's as simple as that.
So, did CAA complicate your life?
Obviously it did, and it was something that we felt very strongly at that point in time, that it was not necessary, at least from the state of Meghalaya's point of view.
But your party's MP did vote in its favor.
Yes, we had in fact at that point in time there was a issue that came up with that, but we were very clear that the CAA should not be passed in the original format. So if you remember, there was an original format where they did not have any kind of exemptions for the Northeast states. So therefore, it was a blanket CAA, and everything was in there. Once we started, opposing that, and we had a number of meetings in Guwahati, and discussed with many regional parties. So once that started happening, we actually got, MHA started calling us and saying, well, how can we minimize the effect of that in the other states of the Northeast? So once that started happening, there was a section where they said protection for, say, Manipur was given through ILP. For Meghalaya, the 6 scheduled areas were exempted, and so on and so forth. Many areas were exempted from the CAA, because at that point in time, it was more in Assam and West Bengal that the targeted audience was there. So once
the targeted audience at that point was purely West Bengal.
And Assam to some extent.
To some extent.
Yeah, to some extent. You're right.
Subsequently, yes.
So what our point was that if that is the case, why do you want to affect us? So therefore, why are you bringing us into the whole thing? So exempt us from it. And that's when things started changing and that's when things started moving. Of course, 99.9% of Meghalaya is in the 6th schedule area.
Right.
So technically we are exempted from it. Our demand only was that the whole of Northeast should be, and our demand was that the whole of the state should be exempted. And also if ILP, like it's been given in Manipur, should be given to us. So based on those conditions, then we were, of course, we opposed it in the beginning, but later on when the exemption was given to us to a large extent, there was a kind of a discussion and we agreed to things.
I want to move on to the issue of another political front that is being formed under Pradyut Debbarma, the Tipra Mota. So they have partnered with Ahom Jatiya Parishad. They're in talks with several leaders across the region. So how significant do you think this kind of, and they've sort of envisioned themselves to be an anti-NEDA front. So how significant do you think this, this front would be in the region?
See, Northeast politics, as you will go along and you will see, there is a lot of regional aspirations of the people that are there. And it's more so now because a lot of youths are coming forward and they want a certain share, for themselves, the importance to be given and certain specific demands that are specific to certain tribes or regions to be given. So with this kind of a demographic change and the kind of mindset that is changing in the youth especially, you will see more and more of these aspirations coming up. Do I see it as a threat? I don't think so. I think we are working together in this whole aspect. It really depends on what space, I guess, you're looking at. Now, when it comes to assemblies, constituency, you will see people voting in a certain pattern. When it comes to district council, you will see people voting in a different pattern. And when it comes to MP, again, there'll be a different pattern of voting. So all of this will really depend on what kind of elections are happening. And people are very intelligent now, especially the younger generation, to be able to select and choose and move forward. Another very important aspect of what's happening in across the nation and of course in Northeast also, there are a lot of individual-centric politics also coming out. So a person like Pradyut Debbarma is a person who's a Maharaja of Tripura. So obviously that legacy is there. So you will see people having some kind of a trust, faith and confidence in that. So that plays a very important role in politics today. And that's where you're seeing that individuals are also making an impact across party lines. And that is another aspect of the political scenario, not just for Northeast, but for the country as a whole also.
Have you been approached by the Tipra Mota at all? Has your party been approached?
No, in fact, Pradyut is a very good friend of mine. So we keep talking. Even in the last election which was held, we had in fact discussed about his district council elections, and I gave whatever guidance I could at that point in time. So it's something that...
you were with him just until last week, I think.
We meet because he's in Shillong once in a while. He's coming back, I'm told, today or tomorrow.
Yeah.
So yes, so we keep talking, but we're very clear on our own political identities. And though there are a lot of areas where we have common interest and common meeting points and where we stand together, and certain areas where we may not agree all the time. So that's natural in politics.
Does the BJP understand the Northeast well enough?
Well, it depends which BJP and which individual is involved. As a party, of course, BJP, depending on the individual concerned, has got different approaches. A person like, say, Mr. Himanta Biswa Sarma, if he is heading their strategy or their entire thought process, the approach will be different. And I would say a person like him would be able to understand the dynamics of what it means to have a discussion with the cookies or the tankals and and so on and so forth. But if you are asking me that some other individual coming in from another region and tries to understand the dynamics may not succeed all the time. So to answer your question, it really depends on who's running the show or handling the situation. In general, Northeast is very complicated and the political dynamics are really, really complicated. One needs to really experience things here, talk to the people, understand to be able to really work in the political arena out here. So it's not so simple.
Also, this is a very devout Christian region, the tribal states. So there is a basic contradiction between BJP's worldview and sort of socio-political life here. I mean, I'm of the generation that remembers church elders getting together, the clergy getting together,
Right.
almost like smoke coming out, and then deciding who will be chief minister first and who will be chief minister second.
Right.
You remember that?
Yes.
How old were you then? Were you born?
No, I don't think
No,
so.
you were not born yet, right? So first of all, tell us exactly what happened then, because most people in the rest of the country will not know, because that can only happen in a state like this.
It's like this, that of course church and the fact that religion is there is very is an important aspect, and there is a kind of ideological difference that comes in. But one has to understand that in politics today, especially in the Northeast and especially in the smaller states, again, as I said, it's a lot depends on the individuals. So you will find that candidates who have won on party A will have a equal good chance if we contest on party B, and
Right.
equal chance on party C. So it's not that the party will play a very important role in making the person win, but party plays more of a role in attracting the winnable
Right.
candidates and brings them in. If you look at what happened to BJP in Manipur last in 2017 election, you will see that most of the people who won were actually Congress people who
yes.
joined the BJP.
Yeah.
So can you say that it's BJP who managed to make things happen? Well, they managed to attract the winning candidates or the sitting MLAs to them. So that's the kind of politics that's happening right now. Which is sustainable? That is the real question. So we'll have to see how we move along, and if a party like BJP is able to adapt and understand the dynamics of Northeast and give that space and that flexibility, then maybe we'll see that kind of thing happening. But in all likelihood, it may not happen. It may not happen. So in those situations, there will be a huge vacuum in the Northeast states, which is happening as we speak.
But Congress's disappearance from the North.
That's the vacuum I'm talking about.
Is it a good thing or a bad thing?
Well, it really depends. Again, there's no right answer to it. The other side of the story is that, of course, having a strong opposition is important in any democracy and a political arena. But while the Congress is, going down, you are seeing that those individuals that were there are now going into other outfits. So, like, for example, you have, the opposition leader here who has in one night just shifted to Trinamool. So that space will never be blank. The vacuum will never be blank. We are working now, for example, the space in Manipur, where I just came back from campaigning last 3 days. Congress is really in a difficult position, and people are looking for an alternative. So we are seeing that a lot of people who were planning to contest are going to contest in the NPP.
So when does NPP, and when does TMC take over the Congress in Manipur?
As far as my knowledge goes, it's I don't think they're moving that aggressively there. I think they are more keen on Tripura because of the kind of similarity in the vote bank that is there. They've got Bengali-speaking vote bank in Tripura. So they're seeing Tripura as a potential state for them. They saw Meghalaya as a state because they got approached by some of the leaders out here. So I think they are not yet in the position to move into Manipur, and Manipur election is in the next 2 months. So it may not be possible to move in at this point of time.
Yeah, but see, if you look at the Northeast, the basic limitations that the BJP will face in the Northeast, outside of Assam and Tripura, and to some extent Manipur, right? Other states, Meghalaya, Nagaland, BJP will have major limitations. Mizoram,
No,
it will not become the Congress.
I agree with you. And that is a kind of the vacuum that I was mentioning about, that space I was mentioning about, that because of the fact that Congress is not able to maintain their stand there, so you will have the regional and other political parties coming in. And though BJP may temporarily be able to fill up the space by having the leaders join them, how long can they sustain it is the question, and that will depend on how they are adjusting, which, as I said, looks difficult.
Do you think your party stands a good chance in Manipur?
one cannot say or predict about elections, but yes, we are doing far better than what we did last time. And a lot of the candidates who were planning to join the Congress or the BJP, you will find once you do go down deep into it, you will find that a lot of them have joined the National People's Party.
And coming to this other issue, the Hindi language issue, I believe you had made a statement very recently about how students should be picking up the language. Youth should be picking up the language given that, it increases their access to employment. But we have this whole debate of Hindi imposition in several parts of the country, including the Northeast, where, Hindi is being seen as an opposition to these smaller language groups. So how would you respond to this kind of criticism of, Hindi is being a...
Well, I would have that opinion if, say, there were no other institutes that were coming up, or if there was no other effort for promoting the other languages. But if you look at it, there is an equal push to learning other languages, in the English also and other foreign languages. So we have that institute in Shillong. So you can learn, I don't know exactly all the languages, but I think French and German and Japanese is there, and English. And so there's an institute for Hindi now. At the same time, the government is now pushing in the new education policy to promote the local tribal languages. Minister had announced that day that we'll be using technology to promote the languages and have the learning tools for the local languages also. So yes, if there was an effort in isolation of just one language, I would agree with what you're saying. But when we're seeing that the effort is throughout, I think it's wrong to conclude that there's a push only for this. Number two, language is something that gives you accessibility no matter which language it is. So if you are learning Japanese, if you are learning Italian or Spanish, and if you are learning your own language, or improving it, I should say, then there is no harm in learning Hindi, and nobody is forcing it. So it's just giving the opportunity for people to learn it also. So therefore, I would not conclude that it's being just kind of imposed on us in that manner. I think there's a push to promote language in general, and Hindi also is one of the languages that's been promoted.
Yeah, so in fact, many of our viewers must be wondering what were we talking about when I said the clergy got involved to decide who rules the state for how long. This happened late 70s or 1980 or sometime?
I don't remember the exact date.
When the
I'm so sorry.
two chief ministerial candidates could not decide who should become chief minister.
First, I think.
First time. So the clergy got them together and locked them up in negotiations and said, you will come out once you've settled it. So then they settled on a half and half term. So that's what happened. Yeah. Unlike in Kashmir, those promises are kept in Meghalaya, particularly when they are consecrated by the clergy. So I have a question from one of our subscribers who says that, look, legacy, political legacy, is that a good thing in democracy or not a good thing in democracy? This is from Sunil Dodeja, who says, is a rich political legacy contrary to the tenets of democracy?
I think the legacy aspect has, of course, its advantages. I'm speaking from my own experience that we were exposed to politics from a very young age. That means just simply how to even shake hands with person or just smile when you see a person and offer a cup of tea. These are basic etiquettes in politics. So you have that advantage and that kind of a thing where you are exposed to the norms of politics at a young age. And that is definitely something it's good, I feel. Now, at the end of the day, that may give you an advantage in a period of time, say 5 years, or maybe 10 years. But at the end of the day, in the world today, especially with social media and everything, and the electronic media being so powerful, I don't think it's possible to sustain the advantages of a legacy. And ultimately, it's the will of the people that will ultimately rule. So there are plus points to it, but I don't think it's sustainable in the long run. Now, does that affect democracy? Well, there's a certain advantage one gets. I can tell you, I've contested 5 times. I've lost twice, including the first time I contested. And I lost the first time I contested because I thought that I was, son of Mr. P.A. Sangma and I should win. And I did not really understand the grassroots politics that was there. And after the loss, I realized that a name can only help you to a certain point. And that's when I started moving in the grassroots, staying in villages, walking to villages, understanding the grassroots problem. And then I won the election in my second try. So I don't think it's something that is going to be sustainable in the long run. But yes, it has a certain advantage in terms of it teaches you certain basics of politics from a young age.
Have you seen the Khasi politics decline? Parties like AP, HLC,
yeah.
All Party Leaders Conference, and the
Yeah.
rest. And is there a sense now that Garos dominate Meghalaya politics?
I don't think it's we can conclude to that. There is Khasi Hills has got a largest share, in
Yes.
fact, of seats, and it has 36 seats in it. And Garo Hills has got 24 seats in it. It just happens that normally in Garo Hills there is a voting pattern where, to some extent, the population votes in favor of one leader or one party, and that there's a sense of 10, 15, 20 MLAs supporting a certain individual, and there is a slight sense of kind of fraction that happens here because of the presence of many political parties. But at the end of the day, when it comes to governance, a lot depends on the chief minister and the leader who's there, who will then have to balance out everything, take a democratic approach to governance. And at least in my tenure in the last 3.5 years, I have been focusing on that and ensuring that there is a large sense of democratic participation from all sides and all regions. So therefore, yes, there is as I said, a consolidation when it comes to leadership and seats in Garo Hills, and there's a slight fraction that happens in Khasi Hills. But at the end, when it comes to governance, it's a participatory form. And especially in my government, I have ensured that I have 6 coalition partners. Not an easy group to manage, and therefore we need to take everybody into confidence.
We have another subscriber question from Pradeep Mishra. So he asks, Meghalaya is a landlocked state and it is very conservative on migration issues. So in such a situation, how can you integrate with the rest of the country and the world economically and socially?
See, number one, of course we are landlocked, but I think you will also agree that now with the presence of media and social media especially, it's not the same as before. So we are seeing a lot of activity on social media. A lot of aspects of tourism also are, of course, COVID time was a difficult time, but now we are seeing a lot of tourism activities happening. So one cannot conclude that that there will not be integration. The integration is happening, whether virtually or in reality. But I must say that the sense of having a kind of protection for your own people or security for your own people is nothing wrong. Everybody has that. You go to Maharashtra and Maharashtra people will say we want quota for our people and we need to protect our people. I think a sense of protection is natural for anybody. What I strongly believe is that that sense of protection and patriotism should not have a negative impact where you start hating somebody else and saying that, well, we will not allow you to do this and that. So that is something that I don't agree. But having, as I said, love and respect and patriotism for your own kind, for your own, for your own tribe or for your own people is natural. And it happens in a lot of societies. And even developed nations go through the same thing. Even US, in fact, had that sense of, feeling that America should be first. So it's natural, I feel. But when it comes to economic activities, you will see as we go along, many such activities are taking place. We are really pushing on entrepreneurship in the state. We feel entrepreneurship is the way forward to take the economy. Government will have a limited role to play, but only when the enterprises come in can we change the economy. So we are seeing all these kind of younger generation coming in and having large enterprises, and I think that is going to change and shape the way Meghalaya is going to be in the future. Yeah. So let's not let's be very clear on few facts. Number one, it's not a Sikh colony. It's not at all. That is number one. It's being really pushed at as if it's a Sikh colony. It's not. It was an area where the employees of the municipal were staying for many years. And then other government employees also started staying there. Now, there was an understanding that they'll be allowed to stay there. And that involved many communities. So it just so happens that then some other communities started coming in and other family members started coming in and settling out there. So let's not, brand it as a Sikh community. That's number one. Number
But it's
two,
called Punjabi line.
it came in, yeah. But there are many words to it. The people call it sweeper colony. People call it Thomotor. The people call it, Punjabi line. There are different names that have been given to it. Multiple names are there. But as I said, that's number one. We need to understand. Number two, in this whole issue, we have tried to resolve this now because there have been a lot of law and order problems coming in the past. So what we decided was that we will, number one, get the ownership of the land clarified so that there is no legal issue in that, which we have done already. Number two is that we have now said that there are about 40 families from the municipal who are still residing there, and about 50 families plus minus from other government departments, again mixed community, who are residing there. So we said that about these 80, 90 families, let's shift them to the official quarters of the departments. And if you look at the quarters that we're giving them, which is right in the heart of the town, in fact, it's just about 200 meters from this location where we're going to give the municipal employees the thing. So we are asking them that come over, stay in the official localities, and then the other employees who are there come over and stay in the official localities of the departments. And then there are individuals who are illegally occupying the location. And so therefore, the ones who are illegally occupying it are trying to, change the entire narrative to saying that the Sikhs are being evacuated from there. It's nothing to do with any religious aspect. If you look at and speak to the other Sikh communities in Shillong, they will tell you there's no issue at all with the Sikh community. It's only the issue of the residents in that particular
But
area.
is it to do with their caste?
Not at all. Absolutely not. It is, as I said, there are mixed communities who are living in that location. And so therefore, if you look at it, the sweeper colony, the municipal employees who are there, who are staying in that sweeper colony, they are being given locations.
I think in Delhi we'd say Safai Karmchari.
हाँ,
Yeah.
वही है. अब उसमें
वही,
कुछ सिख
हाँ.
लोग भी हैं, उसमें कोई अलग दूसरे जनजाति के लोग हैं. So we will basically give everybody the space. But as I said, there are individuals who have other objectives, trying to frame it in that manner.
But many of them claim ownership to that place.
Absolutely. So we are giving that legal ownership and saying that that land is actually belonging to the government. And we have documentation to prove all of that. So we've said that if anybody has any issues with that, they can challenge it in the court.
They say that they've been given this land by the Saim of Mylum.
That's one. So what happened was we have been for the last 2 years going into this issue. And we asked them and gave an opportunity to these individuals who are claiming that please come forward and give the documents. For 2 years, nobody came forward with any document to prove any of those claims that they had. So sufficient time has been given, and now government has come out with the documentation and shown, and if anybody has issues, they are free to go to the court to file a case.
And
against
what
that.
will you do with that land, that area?
So we will see in what is in the best interest of that area. It's an area which is in the heart of the
Yes,
city,
yes.
and of course it's also another factor that being in the heart of the city, there are health concerns because it's an area which has not been maintained well. So from all those angles, also it can become a real a great location for either any kind of commercial activity also, or can have other kind of parks also, or anything that will beautify the entire space. So we have not decided on anything. What is more important to us is to ensure that the people and the employees who are living there, they get the right location first.
Another of our subscribers, Sankit Gupta, is actually asking about the COVID situation in the state, and we know that vaccination rates have been low. So he actually asked how much of your population is currently vaccinated with 1 or 2 doses, and considering the diverse landscape of Meghalaya, how do you plan to achieve 100% vaccination, and what kind of challenges you're looking at?
Yes, so the average, if you look at Shillong, if Meghalaya, yes, we are at a 60% plus minus. Therefore, it's not above the national average. But if you look at the specific economic zones, and the cities that are there, they are at 80% plus, almost 90%. So then you have rural districts which are like at 30%, 40% and 50%, which are of concern, and which is what brings down the average. So Shillong city, for example, is over 80-85%. You go to Tura is about 90%. You go to any of the economic areas that are there, they're above 90%. So yes, in general, at 60, but the areas where the activity and the movement is more is. Number two, it is difficult. We have a very difficult terrain, number one. Number two, people are very busy with daily activities, so it's difficult sometimes to convince them that, that come over for the vaccination. So we are facing challenges from those angles. So what we have decided now, which Honorable Prime Minister had also suggested to all the states, is that we go to the villages. So in the last 2 months, 3 weeks, we have started sending teams who go and stay in the villages, complete the vaccination 100%, and then move forward to the next village. So that is really working for us. In fact, in some of the districts, we saw record number of vaccinations in the last 2-3 days, where this program of kind of a mission mode program has been done. And we feel that this may be the best way to move forward in this case.
And coming to the issue of this border dispute between Assam and Meghalaya, I think the timeline that has been set is of December 30th. By the time, both governments hope to resolve these issues in 6 of the 12 disputed areas. The opposition party, although in the state, has, cautioned you against taking any hasty deal. Where do you stand on these discussions?
First of all, opposition will always say that. When we don't do anything, they will say, why aren't you doing it? When we do it, they will say, why are you doing it? So that's fine. That's their role. I respect that. But let me clarify. From day one, I have been mentioning that border issue is very complicated. So we are not claiming that they'll be able to resolve everything. Number two, we have been clearly stating that we are going to go in phase-wise manner. So 6 locations first. Number three, why we have set the 30th December deadline is we feel that we need to work with some kind of a deadline. Now, in these 6 locations that are there in the first phase, we have preliminary done a kind of an analysis, and we see that there are some areas that may actually not have a dispute. And so we are working towards seeing that whether we can agree on the fact that there is no dispute in this area and clear those from the table. And that's what we're trying to do in the first phase. And I want to very clearly state that if there are differences and any of the states or people don't agree, we will not take it forward. So we will say that, okay, out of the 6 locations, in these 6 locations, 1.5 square kilometers, there is no issue. 0.5 square kilometers, there is an issue. Fine, let's wait for the 0.5, but can we just remove 1.5 from the table? So that's what we are trying to say, that let's go in a phase-wise manner. Let's try to start cleaning the table and removing the ones that are not disputed areas. And we feel that by 30th of December, if not all the 6 locations, some areas in some locations, we should be able to clear. And the idea really is to set the tone. We would like to set the positive tone in the region. We feel that there is no reason for 2 states within the same country to really have bloodshed, when it comes to situations like these. So we want to avoid these kind of situations, and that's really what our target is. Can we resolve everything? Difficult to say right now. But at least we are going to give it a shot. We're going to try and at least try to move forward in a very, very positive and kind of inclusive way.
One more testing issue came up for you here, which is the tribal lifestyles in terms of what they eat. So beef, for example, this is normal to tribal lifestyle. It's part of your staple. How did you handle that with BJP governments? Or have you not been able to handle that?
No, in fact, it's never been an issue with them. They have never mentioned this to me. None of the leaders have ever mentioned this to me. Of course, Assam came out with its bill, to protect, protection of cow and all that. But they have been very clear that the states which want permits.
How do you get your supply of cows?
So our permits are there. So yes, it took us some time, but the process.
How are these permits done?
So it's very simple. State government will simply say that these individuals, these groups, they are asking for permit to bring these animals to Meghalaya for consumption, and we just simply agree to that, or give a certificate, or give a note on that, and that's given to the Assam government, and they allow the transit.
I see.
So it's not complicated at all.
Assam government doesn't negotiate with you. Why do you need so many?
Absolutely not. Absolutely not. But of course, the process is not yet smoothened out. It happened quite recently. So we are in the process of smoothening it so that it becomes kind of a very simple system.
Because otherwise, it had led to resentment.
Because there was a feeling that there would be a blockade for the entire Northeast, because Assam, of course, is
The
kind of
transit
the
point,
transit
yes.
point in the gateway. So there was a feeling like that. But then when we started getting our supplies and we started issuing the permits, it was quite clear that that's not the case. So there was some small teething problems initially. There were some words needed to be changed, and all that is in process. But we don't feel that it's going to be an issue as such. We just need to streamline the process.
We have another question from G. Yogesh, who's actually a student prepping for his UPSC exam. So he says that he's found very little content on the Northeast when studying for this syllabus. So do you think this may be the reason why people from the rest of India take very little interest in the region? And is your state government working with any of the ministries, the Union Education Department, in order to include such content in the syllabus?
Well, I don't think there's any lack of content these days, especially with the internet out there. So I don't know which particular content.
I think he's talking about the school and college curriculums.
Yeah, of course, school and
CRTS.
Fair enough. And of course, there have been a number of occasions where a number of state governments, including ours, have written that these areas, these issues, like simple things like our freedom fighters, a lot of freedom fighters who were there who are not recognized. So we feel that they should be recognized and mentioned in different courses about the cultural aspect, language aspect. These things should come in. So yes, the person, whoever it is absolutely right. And we also would want to do that, and we support that. Of course, as I said, I don't have a specific answer to that, but I agree with what he says.
Conrad, this is a well-connected state. Compared to all other northeastern hill states, this is well connected, this is cosmopolitan. Shillong has been the capital of the northeast for a long time. Rich tradition, lots of literacy. On human development indicators, aspirational districts, National Family Health Survey, on all indicators, why is Meghalaya lagging behind so much? I find it disappointing.
Yeah, of course, it's a legacy issue which has been there for a long time. If you look at our maternal mortality rates and our infant mortality rates, we're one of the highest,
Yes.
in the nation. And it's a concern which was there from day
For
one.
a matrilineal society.
Absolutely, you're right. And it's great that you've asked me this question, because it really allows me to just share. So you have to give me at least a minute or two
Sure.
to explain. So while when we came in, when we realized this maternal mortality rate was high, so we came up with this program called a Mother Program. And we have since then tried to connect institutional delivery to high-risk mothers, to their economic empowerment, and to the children and their health. So there's a program that connects everything from education, rural development, and the health sector, and is bringing it on a technology platform. Now, what we have done through this technology platform is we are actually monitoring every single mother who's pregnant as we speak today. So the 29,000 mothers who are pregnant at any given time, we exactly know that there are 10-15% of them who are high-risk mothers. We exactly also know why they are. We, at any given point in time, we can actually tell you who is the doctor who's supposed to take care of her, or the medical officer, or the ASHA worker, and even the ambulance that's supposed to pick them up in case a situation arises. So this monitoring system in the last 2 years has actually helped us see a large decrease, not sufficient, not enough, but has seen a significant, I should say, decrease in the maternal mortality rates. We're able to actually convince the mothers that, look, you're a high-risk mother. And the entire situation, again, if I go into the analysis of things, we have found out that the spacing between two pregnancies is sometimes very little. We have found that anemic issues are there in large number of mothers. We have seen that the fertility rate is very high, and therefore there are sometimes mothers who are already are only 25 years old and they're in their fourth or fifth pregnancy. So all these aspects have added to this particular problem. But at the same time, I don't deny that yes, even health services, even the institutions that are there, that needs to be strengthened. We need the the ambulances also to be there to take the mothers, and to a large extent, the mothers have to be motivated also to go to institutions for delivery. So we had a very low institution delivery rate of less than 30% when we took over. Today we are over 60% of institution deliveries, and we have actually seen an impact of all of this coming down.
Is church a help or a hindrance?
It can be both, and as I said, it depends on the individuals who are there. But we find that especially now in these recent times, church has been playing a very positive role in actually supporting and helping and realizing that healthcare is very important. So it's been playing a very positive role. There could be one or two incidences where it has been a hindrance, but in general, I would say 90% the church plays a very, very constructive and a very supportive role in these situations. If you look at a large number of health institutions, they're actually run by the church. So that itself speaks on how the church plays a positive role.
If you look at America, for example, the more devout people are, the less likely they are to get vaccinations. So the Bible Belt is.
So as I said, that there are those sections.
Yeah.
I don't deny that, but I would say majority is not. So that's when you ask me that is it, I said yes, it's both. But majority of the people now are definitely seeing that all these kind of health services, vaccination is necessary. Even our leaders of the church, the reverends, the pastors, the bishops and the fathers are pushing it.
You reason with them.
Absolutely, absolutely. No, they come forward. We have discussions. We ask them how they can play an important role in this. As I said, a large number of medical institutes are being, or hospitals are being run by the church itself. So it has a very positive impact. But there could be certain sections, certain percentage that yes, have some hindrances and some issues.
You want to talk about music a little bit before we conclude and let him go to more important things?
I mean, if you want to break into a Bryan Adams song.
Not today. I think I keep telling people I faced enough of the music today, so I don't know. We'll have a different session. Maybe in a better time.
What brought this musical heritage? We know that Shillong Choir is now your big brand ambassador, and you have big music festivals here.
Yes.
What brought this tradition and when?
No, music has always been a strong part of our culture, and it could be for many reasons. It could be because of the church also that is there.
Yes.
It also could be because of our more broader mindset in terms of the Western culture and the music sense. So all of this have added to the musical thing. But what is important to see is that the people and the music entrepreneurs here have started to really come up. And that's really what is the most exciting part. It's not about the talent you have. It's how you can actually use that talent to then commercially make yourself viable. And that is what is the most exciting part that's happening. And Shillong Chamber Choir is a clear example of how they've been able to really exponentially, make themselves grow and become one of the, leading brands in the country.
Your Nagaland counterpart set up a music academy.
Right.
You're doing something like that?
So what we are doing is we have number one started pushing for music entrepreneurs to come up. So yes, Music Academy is important. We feel that people need to be trained in the right manner. But my personal opinion is that unless we don't bring music entrepreneurs into the system, that connection between the commercial aspect of music and the talent that has to be done cannot be achieved. So we are pushing through entrepreneurship more. When it comes to talent and music, we have in fact come out with a new program where which we're calling One Talent, One Skill. So in that we intend to give free training to any individual who has any interest in football or music. And even the people who provide the training will be the local people. So government will fund it, and it's 6 months to 1 year.
Little bit archery also, but
It could be,
seriously,
yes.
you should aim to shoot.
Yeah, absolutely, you're right.
No, not
Yeah.
not usual.
Yeah. So yes, all of these aspects are important, and in music also. In fact, you will see that in the next 2 months, 3 months, you will hear a lot about it. So what we have done is that we will actually have our musicians being funded by the state government, and they'll be asked to perform in different important locations throughout the city. So this also has never happened. We've started engaging with our musicians and asking them, what is it can we do that will actually help you come up and brand yourself and lift the music industry.
So I have a big marketing idea for your state,
Yes, please.
which is just start exporting this air and this sunshine to,
To Delhi?
the rest of the country, particularly
To
Delhi.
Delhi.
And I
Yeah,
think
you're right. You're
we'll be
absolutely right.
printing money with that.
No, so all the other way, we ask people to come
Yes,
here.
absolutely. So
So yes, we have. In fact, we've been really pushing this. We've faced some challenges because of COVID, but we are really pushing hard to start direct flights from Delhi. We started it in between. Again, we faced some challenges. We're hopeful that maybe another week or 10 days time, we should be able to restart the flights from Delhi. So the connectivity now that's happening to Shillong directly is something that's really
but sell
also
the quality
positive.
of air. It's
Yeah, so that's why we're saying we want people to come to Shillong,
Right.
and to rest of Meghalaya. So that's what we'd like to promote.
On that note, I'd really like to thank you, sir. This was a lovely, very engaging discussion on the politics of the region, the state. So thank you so much.
And Angana is now based in the Northeast. So
That's
she's
right.
going to be covering the Northeast for the print. So
She should be bothering me quite a bit in the coming days.
and you should be bothering her once in a while.
anytime.
Thank
So
you very much.
Thank you
and
very much.
Thank you. The
Shekhar.
best to the family
so
and the
much.
best to the state.
Thank you so
And
much for.
May you keep doing better and better.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Bhavadhan. Thank you.